On today's episode, all the way from England, we have Sunil Kumar, SDR Team Lead at KYC Global Technologies.
Learn Sunil's tactical strategies on how he landed 10 job interviews and received 3 job offers during COVID. Wow, your success is our success, so let's get started.
From the heart of Silicon Valley in beautiful San Francisco, California, welcome to the SDR Live podcast with Marcos and Andy.
Sunil, welcome to the SDR Live. Super pumped to have you.
Thanks, man. I'm super pumped to be here. I'm really pleased to see how successful it's been going for you. Obviously, we know each other from Optimizely. But yeah, no, thank you for having me. Thanks, Andy, as well.
Yes, Sunil, super excited. As you can see, we're all wearing kind of our professional get ready to get hired attire. So really interested in hearing more.
Well, I think Sunil is kind of outshining guys because he's got the gray, so you're looking really nice. But today's episode is all about how to sell yourself and get hired. And I mean, Sunil, I would have to say is probably, GOAT doesn't get thrown a lot, greatest of all time. But I mean, the guy is just absolutely crushing it. 10 plus interviews, 3 job offers, got hired at like his favorite company. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. My head's starting to inflate as you're saying that. So, but yeah, no, it was a really interesting job search, to be honest. Obviously, during a pandemic, massive decline in opportunities. But I found with some iteration and some techniques, which we'll get into, there are ways how you can sort of put yourself in the top 5% of the candidate pool. And then you will get offers and you will get interviews as a result.
Of course. And right now, can you talk a little bit more about the team you're on? How big are they? And, what your role is?
Sure. So I'm the SDR Team Lead at KYC Global Technologies. I actually work for the product arm of that business, which is RiskScreen, and they provide regulatory technology solutions in anti-money laundering. So at the moment, RiskScreen is a fairly young company. They were founded off the back of the founding member of the ICA, which is the International Compliance Association. And 3 years ago, he founded his technology business. So obviously a very network guy, has a lot of connections into space. In 3 years, he signed over 800 clients in 63 countries. And currently we're looking to scale this organization to 100 million turnover business. We're still very early on that journey, but they've just invested in a new SDR team, including myself. I'm looking to transition into a leadership role. At the moment, I'm both a contributor and sort of a leader within the team. So yeah, exciting times.
Wow. I mean, fast growing company, that's kind of the space everyone wants to be in. And so I'm just really curious as far as, some of the best quarters you've ever had, whether that be at former companies, and kind of what allowed you to get this opportunity.
Sure. Well, I think the best quarter I had in sales development, well, there's only one place to refer back to, right? And that's Optimizely, because I haven't been in SaaS that long. So the best quarter I had was probably when I was working strategic enterprise. So that was with a level 4 strategic account executive. And he had a really rich territory, to be honest. He had all the main strategic logos across EMEA. And during that quarter, I was able to penetrate 90% of his prioritized accounts and get meetings, in-person meetings with budget holders and decision makers, mostly at C-level, a lot of chief product officers. So yeah, it was a great quarter for that. A lot of which SAO'd and some of which are still in conversation now due to the sales cycle.
I love that. And on top of that, before this, you're telling us are you the cold calling king, or, is that correct?
It's been thrown around. It is a title I go by sometimes. So I was the global GOAT until I left Optimizely from conception to end. So that was a contest ran on meetings booked on the phone during the power hours ran. So that was both in EMEA and in America. So yeah, I was quite pleased with that.
Man, I
That's
think
awesome.
Andy and I could both take some tips from that, right, Andy?
Exactly. To learn from an international goat, I mean, it just makes sense. You have such a great ability to sell the product at Optimizely. I'm sure you have such an ability to sell yourself, which is why we're learning from you today.
Absolutely. And, like we said, today's all about selling yourself to get hired. And I know you prepared a few slides, so would love for you to get into the meat and potatoes and share your screen. That'd be great.
Right, yeah. So I thought I'd start by sharing the post. I shamelessly took the opportunity to start a bit of self-promotion while doing some good during the pandemic. After I'd received an offer I was happy with and accepted the role, I had about 2 weeks before my start date. And I thought I can really do some good here and share what I've learned during interviewing during the pandemic and over the years of interviewing at many different sales companies, and potentially help some people out that are really struggling right now. So this sort of blew up as far as my LinkedIn goes. It got more attention than I've ever received before. It's getting tons of profile views. The post got over 10,000 views. And I got a bunch of messages, and then I really felt the need, over 20 messages sort of in a couple of days. And I really felt the need to scale this and show people how they could replicate this for themselves. So I created a little guide, which is titled How to Sell Yourself and Get Hired. Now, this presentation breaks that guide down as a summary. I'm also happy, and I'm sure you guys, as you mentioned, will be happy to distribute it after in terms of the specific details and exact examples. But for now, we can get into, what I did. So
definitely.
First off, CV and cover letters are dead, translating your value. So obviously that's a controversial opinion, right? Can I ask, do you guys have cover letters? Obviously you will have CVs. What are your thoughts on that?
So yeah, my thoughts real quick on it is that I just feel like a cover letter is just pretty much the same for everybody. You just like, you go onto a website, you ask for cover letter examples, and then you change a few things. And so what I tend to do is I don't really use them to the best of my abilities. But I'm curious in like getting your opinion there.
So yeah, no, I'm exactly the same as you. Many years ago, I did have a couple of cover letters, but they didn't really say much more than the summary in my CV. To tell you the truth, is, I would like the job because I think I'm great, and loads of buzzwords. It wasn't really useful. It wasn't tangible. It didn't show how I, as a person, can do the job and add some real value to the company. So I thought there's probably a much better way to do this. And it's not really in the CV itself, because the CV doesn't give you a lot of opportunity to show things outside of your experience. Obviously, you can show your achievements, but not much more than that, and your job history. So here's my example, right? This is what I call my highlight reel if I was an athlete. But what I tend to spec this into companies and say, hey, look, this is a much more tangible view of the value I can bring to your company. I don't feel this demonstrates me in the most colorful way. Here are some real life examples of what I've done in your field. What it contains here is just the best bits from my CV. It also contains a link to a business case that I wrote optimized. This is a 15-page business case. It was approved by the VP of EMEA for a role change in Optimizely for a strategic SDR.
What?
So that's a real piece of work, right? I feel a whole level of perspective into how I perform in the role. Here are speaking of, my best quarter previously, here are the strategic logos I opened during that quarter. Here I've pulled the testimonials off my LinkedIn from my manager, from my colleague, from my AE, from another one of my AEs, and they're all really positive. They all speak about me and what I've done at the company. And I think putting them just front and foremost in a document like this just puts you, slightly more to the front of the queue. It makes you slightly more tangible. So lastly, I've got a work sample. I like to really show, a real piece of work, something that's real I've done before and is evidence-based. So Kingfisher Group are the company that own Brick Depot, Screwfix, and B&Q. So to put that into perspective, into a global perspective, they're the second largest home improvement brand company in the world after Home Depot, which obviously you guys will be familiar with.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's massive.
So here I'm emailing the Chief Digital Officer, Andy Wolf.
Wow.
This is after I cold called him. So I found his mobile number, yes, as you can see, thanks for taking the time to speak to me last week. Bad practice on my half. I took a week to follow up. Really terrible. I wouldn't advise that. But as you can see, it's a bulky email, a strong email. I would say a lot larger than I'd typically send, but this is because I've already had some good engagement and I've agreed he's going to read it. So it's not cold, right? And these are the responses. That's from Andy. I know he only signs A, but you can see his email there. So looks interesting. Would probably be better speak to Kirsten Groves. She is my Director of Digital Experience Experimentation. Here is John Waring, their Director of Customer Marketing. Because something you'll be very familiar with, guys, is if you break into an account with one contact, it's a big account, why wouldn't you use that opportunity to reference it to other areas of the business? So I created two opportunities here. One with the group and one with Screwfix. There's the Director of Customer Marketing at Screwfix, and this is also an Operations Director at Screwfix, who then referred me to John to get the opportunity.
Wow. So, I mean, it feels like in summary, you create this highlight reel. Like, I think of it like, I mean, I hate to do like an athletic reference, but it's essentially like the best plays that you've done, and you're putting that in an easy way to read with specific strategies, right? So it's not like you randomly went about this. Like, this is the chase that I've done. So I'm curious, and this is what we'll get into like in the interview, but do you bring this up in the interview, like maybe in like your first interview, and you said, hey, like, I'm not sure if you've seen this, but check this out?
So I will try to refer back to it wherever it's relevant. So one thing I always like to do is answer a question with an example and use evidence. So that's when having something prepared like that is incredible, just to be able to pull out and go, hey, an example of where you prospected C-level. Here you go. Right? This is what I did. This was a technique I used. That was the result. What is more clear and a better way to answer a question than being able to go, here's how I did it before.
Of course. Yeah. And I mean, just from my perspective, like the more evidence is key. Instead of just like bullshitting somebody, right? You're actually saying, hey, this is actually real proven tactical advice or ways I went about it, and it just makes you so much more valuable when you go through the interview process. So I think this is great. But I see like your next slide, is that a LinkedIn search, or what's going on there?
Exactly. Just before we move on to that, though, I do want to stress one little thing, and that is your own highlight reel or your own document is only going to be relative to your experience. Now, I was going for an SDR manager role. So I filled this document with some really strong experience that I gained optimizely. But one thing that I've experienced when speaking to people who potentially graduates and entering their first role, they don't have, they're like, what can I fill my document with? Don't be intimidated by that. Use anything in life. The point of this is to demonstrate how you think and how you sell yourself. The content itself is not that important. It's about the effort and the thought process and the presentation. So that's all I wanted to I just wanted to make that clear. Don't be intimidated by the document. Put it into your own perspective. It's about doing the work and showing who you are, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that.
So going on to the next point. Yes, you're right, Marcos. It is a screenshot from LinkedIn. Obviously, we're all very familiar with this, right? I'm sure we all live by Sales Navigator. Or at least have been in the past. One thing I use Sales Navigator for, or LinkedIn Recruiter Lite. The point is, any free advanced search function that is available on a free trial, or I would even recommend paying for, because it's maybe $60 max, and it's going to get you a job at the end of the day. It really will. Use this to identify your stakeholders. So my guide goes through, exactly how you would use LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So I won't go through that now, but obviously you have some very advanced search functionality here that allows you to niche down people within one specific company you're targeting and find out who your hiring manager is, who the hiring manager's boss is, and who everyone is, from talent acquisition to other stakeholders that might influence the process. Now, what I typically like to do here is find 2 people that aren't HR, aren't talent acquisitions, that have a real, the real perspective on what they require out of the role. Those 2 people are usually the hiring manager and the director of the role. So the hiring manager and the hiring manager's boss. Once I've found those people, I'll go ahead and start to engage and message them. You want to be able to influence these people. You know, you don't just apply for a role. If I apply for a role, I get a less than 10% response rate. When I go about it this way, on the same roles I get rejected for, I get offered. So just to put that into perspective, right? I've been rejected by this company here on email, but as you can see, this is the global head of corporate sales. He is my hiring manager's boss. And what I did was connected with him. I said, hi Daniel, hoping to connect with you regarding your open SDR manager role. Could I forward over a work sample? And as you can see by his response, it weren't great. You know, it confused him. Sorry, what do you mean work sample? but the point here, guys, is he's accepted my message. He's connected with me. And I've engaged in conversation. You guys know, right? If you're prospecting, you get a reply. That's 10 times better than getting no reply, even if it's a negative. So yeah, that's here. I have the opportunity to follow up. I'm not restricted by the previous 300 character count limit that I was on the connection request, and I can really put what I want to show him into a really thorough explanation and sell him on me. So please feel free to read through that in your own time. I'm plugging my highlight reel. I'm really emphasizing why he needs to read this, because it shows me in a much more tangible, colorful light than my CV. And then I also reference the specific business case that I mentioned earlier, because I think it's worth him reading that. And obviously, as you can see, the response is, hi, Sunil, sure thing. Let me intro you to the hiring manager. What's your email? Interview, bang, done. And here are 2 more, right? So these are both hiring managers. And straight away, please do. Thanks for reaching out. Email. So you can see it really does work.
So I just want to pause there just real quick.
Sure.
So, and I think I caught this early on, but you got rejected from this company on an email, but you said no, right? You never take no for an answer, right? It's just
no, 100%.
And you went through your outbounding. You found who the corporate head of sales is via LinkedIn Sales Navigator. You thought about it strategically, and then you put yourself in the right position to win. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I get rejected. I get flat out rejected by between 50 and 70. I haven't got an exact number, but street math here, 50 and 70% of the roles I apply for, I get a message saying, oh, but it's not from, this is what's key. It's not from the hiring manager. It's from talent acquisition or HR who are screening against a quantitative set of requirements when this is a qualitative role, right? So I go ahead and I identify who the hiring managers are and how I can present myself in a qualitative manner. And then I get a 90% positive response. Most of the roles I've applied for, I don't have the experience for, but I believe in myself and I back myself as a salesperson to do the roles. And I believe I can demonstrate that experience. So that's how I go about it.
I'm just blown away because I'd never even thought about this. Like when I apply, I just applied through like Indeed.com or Monster.com, whatever, like through the job postings, I get rejected, I move on. But now you're bypassing that whole process and basically showing them, like you said, the qualities that you have that will make you successful in the next role, because this is exactly what an SDR and SR manager would need to teach their whole team. So I'm just absorbing. Wow.
That's exactly it. It's showing them how you would do the job before you've got the job. If I could summarize it in one phrase, it would be that. So yeah, moving on then. Obviously, you guys are all familiar with video prospecting. Yep. I know it's not that cutting edge in the world of sales development anymore. It was a couple of years ago, right? But what I find is this adds an extra layer of sort of authenticity to your approach. It shows you it shows the real you, and it gives you the option. It gives the hiring manager the option to say, to kind of meet you without meeting you. And I'll just show you how I do a video prospect, how I did a video prospecting video for my current company. So as you can see, I start off with Loom, right? This is me using Loom. I start off by blowing up a persona of a target company that I've identified. And I blow up the LinkedIn picture and I acknowledge, hey, I just wanted to get your attention, right? Because that's how I prospect in real life. I think if you, who isn't going to click on a video that has their face blown up on the thumbnail? You just will, right? You're inquisitive. So it's a bit controversial, but I find it works. And then here I just move through the video and take them through the website, safely show some case studies.
In the world, the site is banned if we're the solution for you and James Hambro.
And ask for a meeting. Now, the key to video prospecting is a minute to a minute 30. Don't go over that, you'll lose your audience. If you can do it in a minute, do it in a minute. Demonstrate your knowledge and research. You want to speak slowly, pause for effect, try not to and ah, and keep it moving, right? Get creative, move your browser around. If you're looking at a marketing tech solution, one thing I used to do at Optimizely was I used to blow up built with and look at what was on the front end and say, oh, hey, you're using this to A/B test at the moment. Well, did you know these are its limitations? You know, get as creative as you want. Show them who you are. If you're not comfortable selling the product, then just do a video introduction. It's still really effective.
Just to clarify here, you are selling the product that the company that you're interviewing at to the hiring manager.
Exactly. If you're confident and do that, absolutely do it.
Wow. Yeah, I'm curious. We'll have to put that in probably some of the show notes, the link to your Loom, so people can definitely hear the whole thing. But I think it's game changing. I mean, I have never seen anybody do this. So, I mean, there's a reason why you're absolutely crushing it. So thanks for sharing the video prospecting.
Before I move on to this, lastly, at this stage, if you can identify the hiring manager's phone numbers, call them up, cold call them. That's one thing I'm particularly hot on. I have a massive amount of success. Obviously, I don't really have examples of that because it's very in the moment. I have a massive amount of success downloading Lusher, for example, or Zoom Info, or these prospecting tools out there. Or sometimes, you know, most salespeople just have their numbers on their LinkedIn, luckily enough, and just ringing them up and saying, hey, I know you have a role. I wanted to pitch myself for the role. That's just one more technique I use aside from video prospecting. And messaging. If I'm honest with you, that's my first go-to if it's an option.
Wow. So you're cold calling the manager, someone you think of it, that's the manager, and you're basically saying, hey, Mr. Manager, this is Sunil. I'm calling about the role that I saw. And then what like, I'm curious.
So hey, Mark, I'm ringing up because I'm really interested in working for Okta. I understand you manage the AE team there and you guys have an open position. Now, I'm currently working at Optimizely. I'm a strategic SDR. I'm about 3 months out from becoming an AE myself. But I feel like I've sort of potentially hit my ceiling at Optimizely. So I really wanted to have a conversation with you guys. Do you have a moment to speak now?
I love this. I mean,
Wow.
Let's go. I mean, it like the cold calling key. I mean, you're crushing it right now, but you're giving the insights to the other SDRs out there or people that are just looking to get a job. And something that I always like to say is fortune favors the bold, and you're being very bold. And there's a reason why you're kind of bypassing that first part of the interview. So
especially in this competitive market, when you're competing with so many like large numbers, you have to do these things to really get ahead of the game, be above the noise, and bypass into the hiring manager's view. So
well that's really right, because a lot of people panic when they see 30% unemployment, but I sort of put a logical head on and go, okay, well, that's 30%. But if I see myself as the top 5%, top 1%, whatever it is, top 20%, that should never affect you. So yeah, in terms of preparation, now that you've used these techniques to gain a whole host of interviews, right? You want to prepare, you want to show that you do your due diligence, because ultimately a sales development role or sales role in general, you will live and die by the research you do into your prospects and understanding their perspectives. That will ultimately win your deals, right? We all know we need to do our research. So why would you do anything differently when you're trying to gain employment? So I do all the obvious things: LinkedIn, annual reports, Google the company, Google the people, the big names within the company, Crunchbase, competitors, I sign up to newsletters, I research case studies. But one thing you mentioned when we were sort of meeting about this podcast, Marcos, is you did something quite interesting at Alta, right, when you got your role there, in terms of understanding what the prospect personas were and doing a bit of a market breakdown. Now, that's not something I do to the level you did, so I'd probably be better coming from you.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. If you want to stop your share real quick, I'll share that with the audience and kind of what I look at. Yeah, so I always teach this to all of my mentees as well. And those for you that are looking to get hired, it's very paramount that you go and understand the case studies of the organization, because you can bring this up and say, hey, I saw you work with, Albertsons and Major League Baseball, and I read the case study on X, Y, and Z. But if you want to take it that much, the second step, what I would do is like this MGM resorts, right? You can go to like this customer journey or case study, and pretty much all the time you'll see that this person will they'll highlight someone, but they'll also say what their title is. So like in this case, Scott Howitt, CISO, MGM Resorts. So now what I do is I go through all these case studies and I start putting down the titles, because now half the battle in sales is finding the right personas. So then I will actually come up with the list and say, hey, I've done research. These are the personas that I got from all your case studies. Based off of that, I created a LinkedIn sales nav search. If this was my territory, these are the people I'd go after. And so automatically I'm just trying to envision, like the hiring manager, they could envision me in that role because I've already done so much work. And then also you get a really good idea on like, do I want to work at this company, right? Like, is this something that I want to sell? And so using case studies is like one of the easiest ways to learn the product, but also have more confidence going into the interview.
Well, that's amazing, man. Yeah, no, it's something that I'm going to have to steal myself the next time I'm on the market.
Right.
I love it.
So yeah, no, that will be added to the guide shortly. Thank you, Marcos. Thank you for the contribution. Nominating your stakeholders and interviewers. So what do I mean by that, right? It's a bit of a weird analogy. So I'm someone who eats a lot of chicken, and I know that if I'm going to eat my chicken in 3 days' time, I want to marinate it 3 days before I eat it, because it's just going to taste a lot better. But,
wow, I love that analogy.
So it's sort of the same sort of thought path here. If I'm going to interview at a company, then I want to start influencing them right before I meet them, and all the way to the end of the process as well. So generally, 3 days before, up to 3 days before, but I would tend to do it, I'd correct that, 1 or 2 days before you're due to interview, so it's sort of fresh in their mind and it's not too creepy. And I'd reach out and I'd say, hey, good afternoon, thank you for finding some time today. So this is right on the day, looking forward to speaking, thought it'd be worth connecting. And I dropped, that's my CRO, my current CRO, I dropped him my mobile number. So the reason, what I would also do here is take the opportunity to add some value that he or she doesn't already have available to them. So send a prospecting video, send a video introduction. If you haven't already sent them the highlight reel you created, then go ahead and plug that right here. Now, the reason why I didn't is because my interview came through a recruiter. So they already had all this information to hand because I'd submitted it through the recruiter. But I would always suggest doing it if you're going direct.
Yeah.
So yeah, the key is to stand out from other candidates and always remaining professional, right? You want to be very professional in your outreach and continue in that frame.
I love that. And each step of the way, it just reminds me of an SDR deal cycle or just a prospecting. You're basically showing them exactly the steps that you already will take in the role, and showcasing that you already have the abilities. So it's a win on multiple ends. Not only are you showing them that you can do the job, but you're also being above the noise by doing something that other people aren't doing. So brilliant.
Exactly. Yeah, no. So how to interview. All right. So there's a lot here. Some of it I feel is fairly obvious, but I did want to be, you know, cover all in the guide. So I'll just go over a few points now. One thing I like to do that is quite unique, I feel, is if you're not offered, you always should be offered a drink. And maybe that speaks to the quality of the company if you're not, but if not offered a drink, ask for one.
I love that.
And you can use it as a tool, right? If you've got a glass of water or coffee or tea, and you're unsure of how to answer a question, there's nothing more natural than having a drink and taking a moment to think about it. I have no issue personally taking a long pause. I don't feel uncomfortable taking a long pause before I answer a question, but some people do, and this is a great opportunity to mitigate that. So also, I like to ask good questions. Now, some people don't always get this. The point is, ask questions based off you actively listening. Obviously, have some pre-prepared questions. That's very important. But have questions that you've come up with on the fly of the interview. So it shows that you're listening, shows that you engage, and show that you're developing a real understanding of the interviewer, the product, and the company in the room. Now, one thing to help you do this is you can ask to take notes. I always bring a notepad in and I always take notes. I ask permission first. I don't think it's unprofessional. I think it's the complete opposite. So I'll also move on now to the questions, a few good questions to ask your interviewer. So something great to ask is, what is the interview process going to be like pending a successful first stage interview? So this is key to understanding how you need to prepare and who you need to reach out to and influence. Colleague insights are great. If you've had a really good warm interview with someone within the company, they'll generally volunteer information about anyone and everyone who's involved in this process or will be involved in your team. And those things are really powerful insights you can use to arm yourself throughout the process. And always do your research on the interview. Always ask a personal question. A great resource for this is LinkedIn. So yeah, reference a past company, or maybe they played college football. You know, whatever it is, make sure it's personable to them and it shows you've done your research.
Yeah, I was just going to add a few things here. It's very similar to the sales process where you're trying to multi-thread yourself to build like internal champions so they could fight for you. Yeah, and so I'm curious as far as like the interview process. You know, everyone's always looking for like great questions to ask. Do you have one specific without being so direct? Because like a lot of people can be like, so like, what are the next steps in the interview process? I mean, that's pretty direct. Some people say that I do, but some people don't want to say that.
Yeah. So I'll be honest with you. I'm very direct.
Okay.
I in sales, I think from my perspective, and it might not be the right perspective, but I think you stand to benefit from coming across as direct, but calculated, right? So the way I would ask is, okay, so I've really enjoyed this interview. I feel like, you know, you've also enjoyed interviewing with me. You know, this has gone really positive, at least from my perspective. And sort of pause, give them the opportunity to agree with you or disagree, right? You want to qualify that.
Assume the close.
Yeah, exactly. Start positioning the close, and then as soon as they're going, yeah, no, this was great, loved you, you know, whatever they're saying about you, then say, okay, well, let me take the opportunity to prepare myself for the next stages. I really want to do my best work throughout this interview process. I feel like
I love that.
I feel like this is the company for me, or what have you, and then just ask them directly. You know, what am I walking into? What are the next steps? How can I prepare myself? If you built that, I think the key here is being a good read of your interviewer. If you haven't built that rapport, don't ask. If you have, definitely do. You've got to know how you're being perceived.
Okay, that I love the way you position that. Like, what am I walking into? Can you give me some guidance? I always like to say is like, do I have your support? If so, like, you know, what are some good next steps? Yeah, and you're right. It's like the assumptive close. So I've actually done this sometimes where I said, hey, typically like next steps would be me to meet with like the team in general is that a next step? It just kind of it's bold, but hey, I also do that like on deals, right? So if I'm single threaded, I'll say, hey, typically a good next step is we meet with you, your manager, and any other stakeholders just to get them on board. You're trying to close, right? So at the end of the day too, like, I always think of it like it's a big job market, right? Everyone's always hiring. So like if you could take some risks on some, job interviews that you do and you learn, right? But this is amazing.
So lastly, offer and close. So generally speaking, if you've done all of this, you should have multiple offers. If you haven't, this differs a little bit, but what I like to do is take the opportunity to influence the offer and really get what I need out of the opportunities I have in front of me. I don't believe in a set out salary banding. If it says, oh, salary is from this range to that range, and you've smashed the interview and they are eating out of the palm of your hand, then tack another XXX onto that, whatever it is, whatever you feel your value is.
Of course.
And I'll be honest with you, in my last 3 roles I've done that and it worked. So you can definitely do it. It works. I also use the opportunity to influence the speed of the outcome. If I know that I've got loads of offers and some people are stalling with the candidates, but I know that I'm the best one, then I'll say, hey, look, I'm going to be gone soon. Make me an offer. So not exactly like that, but obviously I think you get the thought.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. I think it's always good here too to be interviewing with several companies at once, because it does create this idea of scarcity theory, right? Which is like, and if you crushed it, people like the hardest 2 roles to hire for are engineering and sales, right? Because, if you could get a really great salesperson in your org, they could crush their number and hit quota, and like they could really help you hit your number. But if you're that person and you have multiple offers, like feel free to use that as a leverage. And like, I think if our audience goes out and uses your guide and your techniques, they're going to have multiple offers. So I'm excited to kind of see some of the wins that, and I think you actually might have some wins, right, from people reaching out to you. Is that the case?
Well, yeah, that's it. So obviously I know you guys usually do sort of a summary of the presentation, but I thought staying with the theme of this process, it'd be more useful to add some real examples of where this has worked.
Wow,
so
check that out.
So here we go. They're very wordy. They again, making my head even bigger in the way they speak about the experience and the process. Feel free to read them in your own time if you like. But in short, Andrea is a very smart girl. She has, a bunch of A-star A levels, which is sort of our post-school qualification before college in the UK. And she has a first degree from university, which is obviously the college equivalent to a very strong degree from a top university. Now, she wants to be a management consultant, so completely outside of sales. After 2 weeks of working with her, she came out with 2 offers. She'd been searching for weeks during the pandemic and had she consistently got to the latter stages of the process, but just wasn't able to get an offer. With her, she was very good. It was just a matter of differentiating herself, and things like video prospecting were a massive differentiator for herself. The video prospecting and the highlight reel itself made a big difference. So Oriana is an entry-level SDR. She's got some experience in SDR previously, and she again was interviewing for quite a while. She reached out to me, and she was really struggling to get past the sort of the first and medium stages of the interview process. Now, I went ahead and coached Oriana on the phone. Now, one thing I picked up on quite quickly was she tended to over-explain the point, which is something I talked about on how to interview. So always answer questions directly with evidence. Now, when I would ask Oriana a question, she would answer it in a very nice way, but she'd sort of bounce around the point and not always answer it directly. And I just said, look, that's a killer in sales, right? You need to answer your questions concisely and directly, and always use evidence if you can. And she really took that on board. To her credit, she was very coachable. Yeah, within a week, she got offered and accepted at Puppet, which are a great pre-IPO, 200 million in funding or something. So very cool company.
Wow.
Lewis is a graduate, no prior sales experience. He's done B2C retail. He's someone who had a natural flair for sales in the way he came across, but just lacked the hard skills and the knowledge, obviously, as we all do at that point in time. So he really benefited from learning about prospecting, learning about multi-channel techniques, which is all in the guide. You know, it's all applicable to the role. And he took that on board and used video prospecting and got a job in 7 days, as you can see there.
Wow.
So yeah, he's offered and closed as well. And he's in a 360 sales role.
Jeez.
So very cool for him.
I gotta put in a clap for you, because you're just delivering straight up value throughout this entire podcast, and it goes to show you, it feels like you have a desire to help others be successful, right? Kind of giving back, and your strategies are helping people land offers and jobs. And it's just like, we're honored to have you on the podcast for sure.
Honestly, guys, I really appreciate what you're doing. I really appreciate you having me on here. The fact that you guys are cutting through the muck of most sales podcasts out there and really showing, the real technique behind how top performers operate. You guys are doing a service to the industry. So it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. I've learned so much, and now we're going to put you on the hot seat with some rapid fire questions. So the first one that we always like to ask is, do you love to win or do you hate to lose?
I'd say it depends who I lose to, but I love to win.
Oh, I love it. Is there a reason why?
I'd say my desire is just to win at all costs. So yeah, I'm ultra competitive with myself. If I feel I'm not hitting the mark, then it's not other people that tend to get at me, unless I don't like those people. It's myself. So yeah.
I love that.
Brilliant. All right. Second question. Who would you say are your top 3 role models that have been in your life?
Top 3 role models. That's interesting. I'd say my dad, because my dad is an engineer by trade, and he's had a very different life to myself. I've been very fortunate for the work he's put in. But it's just incredible to see, at his age now, he still goes and puts in 12 hours every day. And he's that kind of guy, And so
the work ethic.
Yeah, he's been my top role model. In terms of other role models, I'd say a fairly recent one. I'm a big fan of Sam Nelson. So obviously the blue-haired guy at Outreach, everyone will know him. But he has some very controversial opinions on sales development that are thoughts I have sort of always had and always agreed with. And I just like the fact he's out there making it clear and sort of sharing the secret sauce. And a third would be sort of, I'm going to say Anderson Silva, just because he's my sports.
I love that.
I'm a fan, and Anderson is just, he's my go. Just what he did to fight and how he evolved it. No one was striking like Anderson before Anderson. So he flipped his head. Category creator, if you like.
That's great. And then last question before we leave is, what are some of those books? Where our audience is a big fan of books. That could be anything from sales related to non-sales related as well.
So some good books to read. The only sales book I've ever read, I'll be honest with you, I haven't read a lot of sales books, and that's because I really should read more. No,
you're naturally gifted. That's what it is.
But the only sales book I've read is The Challenger Sale. And for me, that really spoke to me. It just helps me understand. That's the first book I read before joining Optimizely, because I just really wanted to understand enterprise selling. And personally, I'm a big fan of challenging a customer with value and education. I've always believed, if you know your market and you know your sector, then you shouldn't be afraid to get into constructive conversations, even if they're slightly, they're not as warm as you would like, because you're going to build credibility and you're going to show yourself as a valuable resource, and ultimately that's going to benefit you in the long run. So yeah, I'd say the challenger sale for sure. And secondly, Deep Work. Deep Work isn't a sales book. It's by a guy called Cal Newport, I think.
Sounds familiar.
Don't quote me on that. But that's a really interesting book that a friend of Harry J. Araya, from Optimizely, we both know that guy. So he was a really successful process-driven SDR in EMEA. He crushed his quota every month in DAC. And one thing he told me was, read Deep Work. It was like, that changed my life. And I was like, okay, if Harry's telling me to read something and it changed his life, I'm going to go ahead and read it. And I agree. It really shows you the value of having scheduling and time for just, not responding to emails and just getting in a deep frame of thought and shutting yourself off and producing a high quality piece of work. Now, in sales development, it's not that applicable because we can't be turned off. It's something that you've got to be juggling how many plates all of the time. But for things like strategic content, if you can spend 2 to 4 hours a week just in deep work, really planning your emails, it will make a big difference to your workflows.
Wow. Deep work, Andy. That's what we need to get.
Yes, we do. There you have it.
Yeah, and just to wrap it up, I just want to say thanks for coming on the show. If any of the SDRs, I'm sure you're gonna, well, not just SDRs, but this scales across any type of industry. They're gonna probably be reaching out. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
So connect with me on LinkedIn. Drop me a message. I'm happy to speak to anyone and everyone. I can't guarantee I will respond in a timely fashion, but give me sort of 7 days, a weekend. And I will get back to everyone. I'm passionate about helping. This is a free service. I'll never charge anyone for it. If I can help you, do let me know. But I'm pretty sure this guide will be made available by myself, hopefully by you guys as well. And then, feel free to read through it at your own time. Obviously, the instructional is on the podcast. So, if you do get stuck, let me know.
Wow. I mean, the expert himself, Sunil. I mean, chills just hearing about, your whole strategy. It's game changing. I've never seen anyone with your detail and strategy do this. And there's a reason why you're at your dream job now. And we really appreciate coming on the show. Andy, any last thoughts?
No, thank you so much. I mean, I'm comfortable in my position right now, but after hearing this whole podcast, I'm ready to go land my next job and try those tips out. So, but anyways, thank you, Sunil. You have been wonderful. Those tips have been great. I'm sure if you need more tips, if you just want the guide or whatever, comment below, as well as follow Sunil on LinkedIn. Thanks again.
Thank you, guys. Take care. Speak to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the SDR Live podcast. If you like this episode, please share, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you tune in next week and have a fantastic week.